When something happens that catches you off guard, it's best to talk about it. Let me repeat that again. When something happens that catches you off guard, don't keep quiet because you want to avoid to start looping. So what's looping? Looping for me is that you are stuck in that one event or in that one emotion or that one thing happening. So Tafara, what do you have in mind? Can you send me a comment when it comes to being in the video? Oh, I think it's Claudia actually. So just write a little something about it. Hi, Grace. So this is basically about, hey, something is stuck there and you are like, okay, now I need to unwind. So something happened which made me literally scream and shout on the spot. Oh, you love Brazil? Well, you have to talk in English, so okay, there you go. I do hope that you want to talk about the same topic because this was literally about, hey, what happens when something is stuck? You should be on any moment now. You are in black. Can you please turn on the camera? Can you please turn on the camera? So you are live, Zoe, TV on the background. Okay, so when people go live, I do expect them to actually participate in the live. I don't want anything in black. I want to see the people. And I also want to hear their voices. I don't want to hear television in the background. So let's talk a little bit about what just happened, because I do believe that that's important. And by the way, someone called Official Jason Begay joined. Well, let me tell you straight away, there's no such thing as an Official Jason Begay. Together with Joe, I am actually an administrator of a site she set up on the Facebook. I don't want to know how many Jason Begays are applying to become part of that. So he has no social media, so let's not go there. Okay, getting back to what I originally said. So when something happens, what do? That's basically what it came down to. And in this case, this was about, I've been so thrown off guard. And that was the whole thing. This was about when you're caught off guard, what do you do? And I basically said, talk about it. Well, you actually saw me, like literally live. Someone caught me off guard. So she calls herself Claudia Tavares from Brazil. But apparently she had no intention to actually talk about it. She just showed her face. Well, she didn't even show her face. All I saw was a dark room. So I love it when people want to interact, but please do interact, because I want to get something across. However, the example that I wanted to talk about, because it has been bugging me the moment that it had happened. I actually sort of forgot about it until I talked about it today, because I wrote a blog post about it. And I was at IKEA, the big warehouse where you get all the stuff. So it was time to go out. There was a revolving door, and the revolving door made it possible to echo the sound. So I'm not really a fan of revolving doors, but it's the way it is. And there were three people behind me, 2 adults and a kid. So I walked out and I was like, hey, Peter, minding my own business. Of course, I knew they were behind me. Then all of a sudden, the adult, the guy, the father, starts screaming at the boy. Apparently, he had done something he was not supposed to do. I have no clue what he did. What I do know was that that sound was bouncing around, you know, against the walls, and it magnified, and it literally, it was like it exploded in my ear, that sound. So I've got a shattered eardrum on the left side, and I cannot handle unexpected loud sounds. So it's basically like watching a movie, and all of a sudden something happened, and it's like a scream. You're like, and you cringe. Hi, Peter. If you want to come on, please let me know. I'm talking about how to deal with unexpected situations, and you know, maybe you have a little something you want to share too. But anyway, I was basically surprised at my own reaction, because it was, and I explained this to someone, it was like someone did this, and then I was like, okay, this for me consisted in, in less than a second, when I heard the sound, I turned around and I get away from the speaker for a sec, and I was literally like, hey, shut it down. I literally screamed at them, and I didn't think about it. It just happened. I literally screamed. And then the emotion was gone on my end, and then my volume was down again. And I was like, I said, I cannot handle the sound. So of course, on their end, something totally different happened, because they were probably as surprised about my reaction as I was about my own. And they most certainly didn't expect me to shout, because they did something with their kid. They said something to their kid. So first of all, they said, don't interfere. Well, I won't meddle with whatever they said. I don't even know what it was they were upset about. The only thing was, I was like, don't shout when the sound echoes, because that's something I can't handle. And then she started saying something, trying to prove that she was right. And by the way, she started calling me names too. And I was like, you know, so when I was going to walk to the hotel after IKEA anyway, you know, to sit down and do something, to work a little bit. And I was like, what just happened? You know, I was totally flabbergasted. What just happened? Why did I react the way I did? And why did she react the way? Well, I knew why she reacted the way she did, because she didn't expect me to yell back instantly when they were, you know, telling their little kids to not do something. And I can appreciate parenting, you know, that you immediately tell your kid, like, hey, that's a no-go. You just don't have to scream. and I was like, okay, is this a result of PTSD? Could be, you know, I've been bullied a lot. I had to defend myself a lot. But it's also because I do have shattered eardrum, and I know that I react to sound way more. Also, I'm one of those people who's very sensitive to sound, but also to touch, light, actually. So I process things way more intense than other people do. And that's actually what the underlying cause is for my reaction. So it could be, you know, all things combined, which probably is the case. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I thought about it. I wrote a little something, and I also expressed like, hey, so what would one normally do? And the first thing I actually wrote down is, well, don't do what I did. Don't start yelling back at the other one, because then it's like, and who's going to win? I didn't want to do that. So I try to express like, hey, this is because the sound was too loud. They didn't hear that. They were in their own world. I was still in my own world. They went their way. I went my way. Done. But say that you keep thinking about it, and you would run into someone else. doing the same thing, or you would run into those people again. And when something like that happens again, I do believe it's good to be prepared. So when something happens and you're like, hey, what just happened? Think about it, talk to others about it, write about it, so you can actually understand what is it. With this thing in mind, you don't want to keep thinking about it. So then we get to what I call looping. So you don't want to keep thinking about it like every minute of the day for the next so many days. Because then it's stuck in your mind and your emotions still go haywire, and you don't want your emotions to go haywire. You don't want to be angry or feel disappointed or powerless, whereas you would have liked to be in control. So am I satisfied with what happened? Well, I guess basically because it helped me to write it down. I had good material for a blog post, so that was good too. Right now I've got the inspiration for this video, and I'm actually combining two things, because in my group coaching session I was talking about looping, so something that's stuck on your mind, and you know, you keep thinking about it and thinking about it, but it doesn't really help. And at the same time, I am also sharing a little bit about who I am. So in my post that I made, I actually said, you get a response right back from me. I'm not sure how I wrote it down, but it's like, hey, cut it down or something, you know, hey, stop it. And when I was talking to one of my coaches just now, because we were talking about the looping, which I had explained last week at the end of the coaching call, I want to know what she got out of it. So we talked about what the looping meant to me, and then I actually showed her, like, yeah, it was literally as if he whacked me on the ear, on my head. He didn't, because he was behind me and he was shouting at his kid. But because the sound was so loud, it was literally as if he had whacked me on the head. And that's what I responded to. So in defense, I literally immediately screamed like, hey, stop it. And yeah, I do believe that that's a reaction to being sort of traumatized, but also as a defense mechanism. I've have to learn in the last couple of years that I am not stable when it comes to walking. So I had to learn to speak up and speak out in order to be understood, to be seen, heard, and understood by doctors, but also by other people. So coming to think about all of this, it's not just about bullying, but it's also about, hey, here I am, and you cannot just do this, because then you catch me off guard, I lose my balance, I might fall. So I rose. I'm not going to say that this actually would have happened, that I would have fallen down. I don't think my balance is that much off. But in the last 8 years, 9 years, and it still is the case, when people are around, I need to be a little bit more careful. So when it's crowded, I will wear my braces. I also will just stop when people are trying to walk through me, and I will just look at them like, hey, what are you doing? So I'm far more reactive than I used to be before I actually tripped on that brick and twisted my ankle and got a torn ligament and a bone which went haywire. Basically, before I was no longer able to stand on 2 feet. And nowadays, I can walk again, but sometimes I have to do so with crutches because of the pain. But I'm still battling with the balance. So one day my balance is a lot better than the other day. I can stand on 2 feet again, thanks to 2 surgeries, which I'm so grateful for. And also due to a lot of stability exercises, but it's an ongoing struggle. And as a result, I'm sort of in a defense mechanism probably, which I'm not aware of until something happens. And I do believe that my immediate reaction, because there was no thinking, I literally did not think about it. It was an immediate response, was the result of me defending myself. It was literally a defending mechanism. It was an instant overload. I couldn't handle it. And that's why I literally screamed like, hey, stop it. Which, of course, I hope they don't run into too many people who do so. But then again, maybe there are people out there who would have loved to have done the same thing because they cannot handle the sound either. And because they are not, we don't want to be part of someone else's conversation or whatever is going on. And of course, I get it that when there are parents, when they have to tell their kids like, hey, watch out, this is something you cannot be doing. That will happen, wherever we are. And I do believe that it's good that, that you show people this can be done and this cannot be done. But, screaming in public, that's a no-go. So, yeah, that applies to me too, that it's a no-go. And, when I can expect something, that there's going to be discussion or whatever, then I won't get that. Well, excited is not a good word. Emotional, maybe, or trying to get my, I do want to be heard. Absolutely. There's a reason it says speak up, speak out, share your voice, share your story. But more importantly, I want to be understood and I want to be able to explain why I do what I do. Or what I did. And that could also mean that I apologize to someone like, oh, I'm sorry for what I did. This is what happened. It's also about making people aware. And that's what I've noticed in the last couple of years, especially during COVID. People kept their distance more. And then straight after COVID, and people were literally crashing into one another. And that's something I still don't want to do. I still want to keep my distance. Like I said, I have to be aware of how I walk, whenever I walk, to make sure that I don't trip. Just recently, I was downtown. And, it's like this. The bricks are not aligned. It's not flat. And so the city is really good at making a mess of it. And when it's too bad, they put up a sign, be careful because, of loose stones. That's how they solve it, basically. And so I have to, I cannot, even if I would like to, type a little thing when I'm walking. I really can't do that. I need to pay attention to what it is I'm doing. So every step for me is almost like a milestone. But I know it's important to keep doing it, to improve my walking, to improve my stability. It's also good for my back. So I tend to have a hernia that every now and then, pops up or pops out. Depends on how you want to look at it. And so in order to be able to be moving and to be mobile, it's so important to get out there and do it. And I want to push myself to walk bigger distances than I've done before. So it's actually kind of funny, and this is a true story. So the week before, I went into the shop, and I don't like shopping, at least not for clothing. And she helped me, I tried a few things, and actually a lot of things. So I was helped, perfectly. I was happy. And then they had to rearrange something. So the trousers were a little bit too long. So they had to make sure that it was sewn by someone else. And then I would pick it up the next week. So that next week, I was on crutches, so I walked into the store. But I've walked with crutches for over 7 years. So the guy behind the counter was looking at me, and I just went in there, you know, straight face, and walked, and I knew what he was thinking. I was laughing inside because, you know, I knew what was going on. Like, I didn't see her with crutches before, did I? No. And she's walking with crutches. Have I missed something? You know, all those things. So I went there with a straight face. Of course, he said something about it. And I said, well, you know, I can walk backwards with those crutches. I can do crutch hopping and I go quicker than you can walk. I can dance with my crutches. So yeah, you haven't seen me with them, but it is what happened. So I'm pretty comfortable talking about it. Because this is basically expected. It's happened for years now. And I've had the most awesome reactions up to when I had the zebra print. So I used covers around my crutches. And someone said, oh, I'm on safari. I see a zebra next to me. That was so cool. That was one of the most fantastic stories and meetings I had with that person, or with any person, about the crutches. That was so cool, actually. Anyway, getting back to it, I had some fun with it. You know, I talked about it. It felt good, but it does show that one moment I walk with them, the other one without them, and then the next moment I have to use them again. So it all depends on what I'm doing. And I guess that because of this, because of having to be careful with my own health, that's probably why I reacted. So it didn't have a consequence for my stability, but because it was literally as if someone whacked me on the ear, it's probably why I reacted the way I did. So in my blog post, I actually come up with a number of things you can do about it. And I'm going to list one specifically. So, of course, I already said, talk about it, ponder about it, all that stuff. But here's the thing. How about earplugs? And now we get to the most interesting part, because there are so many different things you can do. So a lot of people out there who are sensitive to sound, and you can recognize people with autism because they usually walk around with a big earphone to block out all those stimuli from outside. They don't want that, so they're like in their own world. When I'm walking, I'm actually also in my own world. I don't use the big things. I use this thing, so this literally goes on there, so I can still hear what's going on, which I like. But I want to know what's going on behind me and around me. So I always say I've got eyes in the back of my head, which also is the result of things that have happened to me in the past. So I think I was in my early 20s when someone tried to pull me into the bushes. Big guy, way bigger than I was. Well, the result was basically I screamed. He tried to ask me nicely not to scream. I moved around, I wiggled, you know, everything in order to get him away. And then he started running and he was gone. And of course, no one had hurt him or me, but he had hurt me. And so he ran off. So which was good. But after that, I always looked at the doors of my car. So I was actually walking to a bus stop from the fitness center. It was only a small walk. But yeah, I do have eyes in the back of my head. So I don't know if I had it before, because I was bullied for years on end, starting as early as in kindergarten, actually, because of my looks. And I also was on jiu-jitsu. So probably that has already made me more aware of, hey, what are people doing? So I'm very sensitive of what people are saying, not saying, doing, not doing. You know, I always am aware of my surroundings and what's going on. And that's probably, so I knew they were in there. But I didn't pay attention to what they were doing until, of course, I was confronted with that sound when they were screaming. So I do believe that it's really good to express, hey, what just happened? Talk about it. If you can do it, in a calm manner, both of you, awesome. If you can't, talk to someone else close to you about it. Maybe a friend, call someone. Actually, what happened was I went into the hotel, but on the way to the hotel, which was only like a minute walking, someone called me. So that first person that called me, I literally said it like, oh my God, what just happened? And I told her about it, and she understood where I was coming from, because she's very sensitive as well. And then later on, when I was paying the bill, when I was leaving the restaurant, where it's basically a hotel, and they have a great entrance and a foyer where you can sit down. Well, I told them too, basically, when, I paid the bill, and I was like, and then by that time I already had written everything down. So it was nice to have pondered about it, come up with some solutions, because if I want to get something across, then let's make it meaningful, right? Otherwise, it's not just about the excitement of the story, and maybe the story in itself isn't that interesting at all, although I do believe that people might be surprised about my reaction. I mean, if you see the picture on the post on Instagram, you're like, oh, why are you looking, like that? And I wasn't smiling on that picture. I was like, literally, it was as if my energy had instantly drowned that 1 second, because that's what it felt like. Anyway, I shared today a little again, so it's a few days later. And I'll probably be thinking about it a little bit more, because I still want to know, like, hey, is this a more autism kind of thing? And I know I'm slightly, other people who have it already said, you might be one of those. I do know that I'm sensitive to a lot of things. So in society, we have two things. And I know I'm talking about all these different things. Yes, I've got ADHD, so I'm hyper. So I go from one topic to another, and then I go back again. So no worries, I'll always get back. But one of those things is, and I think this is so interesting, neuroconvergent versus neurodivergent. So basically, it's like, hey, a lot of people can react in a certain way, and they are not bothered by what's the norm, whatever that norm is in society. So they can basically uphold themselves. They are, cool, going to school, whatever rules the employer has. I'm not one of those people, by the way. I would braid my hair in class. I would do my homework. I would write little letters. And I'll never forget that I would be looking at the teacher like, okay. And he said, well, do that math. And I was like, yeah, well, here's the answer. It was one of the few things that literally was so easy. But yeah, I was always one of those people who would like to be a little bit distracted. So nowadays, of course, they know much more about it than back in the days. But when it comes to employers and doing the stuff that other people do, I was always the odd one out. They always gave me the clients who were different. And it worked really well. So somehow they picked up on it. But then when they tried to make me do the things the way that other people did it, then of course that didn't work, because I had the odd ones out too. And yeah, well, you had to handle them a little bit differently. That's why they loved me. And yeah, they did, literally, because a lot of people actually asked me to keep working there, so they would have someone to talk to, or actually come work for them. So, but getting back to it, it's I know I don't react a lot of times the way other people do. And basically, I wouldn't be able to function, you know, working 8 to 5. I mean, just getting up at 8 o'clock. Oh my God. But also, you know, I have to take a break regularly, maybe sleep a little bit, move around a lot. There's a lot going on in order to be able to do something. But in the couple of hours that I do work, I do a lot more than most people do. And by the way, I'm working for myself now. So basically, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. And there are a number of people I do help out and talk to almost daily, because otherwise they are so distraught and they are panicky, and I want to make sure that they're comfortable again. And I know, because they've told me that whenever I talk to them, they calm down again and they feel confident. And I have to admit, and this is very cool, and I'm utmost proud of it. So yeah, I'm going to say it. They actually are thinking lately, what would Lexi do? I think that's one of the coolest things to hear, that people are actually saying, what would Lexi do? So they hear me. So in their presence, sometimes I get phone calls and they hear me talk to other people and they're like, oh my God, how do you dare say this? But you know, like I said, if you have been battling to be heard for years on end, then you'll learn to express yourself, because I cannot travel somewhere, whether it's at an airport or whatever it is, without assistance. You know, I'm happy that I'm able to drive my car. I do have a disability card, a parking card, which is amazing. But what's normal for most people, and they never think about it, is not normal for me. You know, walking is not normal. Being able to ride my bike is not normal. And even now, when I'm really tired and I get on my bike, it might happen that I'm going like this, you know, almost falling off because of my coordination. So when I'm really tired, my coordination is off. And it's like my muscles need to realign again and like, oh, yeah, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And then I get going again. So when I've sat down for a long time, I might get up and literally walk backwards and then back forward again. And there I am again. So it's literally as if everything has to start up. So that means that because I cannot do it for a long time, but I also have to start up, that things are a little different on my end, which I have to laugh about most of the time. But yeah, as a result, knowing what it's like not to be heard, seen, understood, and valued, I feel like I want to prevent other people from experiencing that same thing. I mean, I've gone through it. Let's hope other people don't have to go through it themselves. So I'm sort of like a pit bull, you know, I guard them. And so what I basically do is I when it comes to people locally, I make sure that I talk on their behalf, so both parties understand one another. So there's a difference with what I do online. Online, I teach people how to understand what people are doing. I also do so on the phone. But when it comes to those who are the young ones, who are learning to cope in adult life, usually working life, there's a little more that's needed. So I talk to their employers if needed, to certain companies who can arrange certain things for them, you know, the official offices, you know, whatever it is. And doctors, of course, hospitals, so they can get the help they need, and the other one actually understands what they need. And I have to say, it's very gratifying to do so, especially because then at some point you see the other one calming down. Like, hey, there's someone who believes in me. There's someone who fights for me. I'm not doing this alone anymore. And, you know, there's something about being the odd one out. I love the term inclusion. And because just because someone is not up to the norm, does that mean that we have to exclude that person and ignore it and bully him or her? No, that's not correct. I mean, please, let's be considerate of other people. And, you know, looking at Instagram, I follow a few people. One of them is Mark Bryan. He's so cool. He's this guy. I think he's got a bald head, and he walks in those really high heels. And oh my God, it looks good on him. It's sexy actually, and but I wouldn't be able to walk on heels, and let alone him. But he's doing it, and you know, it's not like he is a transgender or anything. It's not that he wants to be a woman. He just likes to wear heels and wear a skirt. Well, good on you. And I love it when I see the shoots, the photo shoots and all that stuff. But then there are people, oh, don't you dare come into the ladies' room and touch my kid. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This guy is only wearing what he likes to wear. And then you're going to like, sort of like what that woman did when she was yelling at me. Remember at IKEA with the revolving door? If you don't know what I'm talking about, then get back to the beginning. And also, and this is actually kind of funny, Crystal will see you now. So she's a drag queen. And oh my God, if you see, I'm not sure if I have to say him or her. So he refers to himself as a she. So it's a guy who cross dresses, but we basically say she, so Crystal. So I hope I'm not saying something that's not correct. I'm not sure how to handle this precisely, so I'm actually asking other people, what do I say? So I don't want to offend others. But anyway, she is working out, you know, muscular, all looks amazing. And I noticed that there were some pictures where she was in ropes and all, you know, like a circus act. And so she's actually saying like, hey, I need to work hard for this. And it's cool to actually see how she gets in the street, how people approach her, and how she talks about it. And that's, for me, what inclusion is also about. So it's not just about the people who have like autism or have some mental issues, making it harder for them to cope with the outside world. I do believe it's also about how you dress and come across. So when I was in high school, I would wear those leopard pants and those shirts, you know, metal, because I'm a metalhead, the scarves and all that stuff. So there were 4 metalheads at our school, 300 people. Plus people, and we were with 4, and because you could recognize us by our looks. And even nowadays you can see it really well, but I've got blue hair and all that stuff. So you know, I've literally got the stars now. I'm not using that filter from Kat Von D anymore, although I love it, and she really inspired me. But I've got them actually tattooed on my face now. And this is about being able to be who you are authentically. And I want people to be able to be who they are, express who they are, live in a society where they can be who they are without being terrified of what's going to happen, without being traumatized by people and what's being done. And I don't want them to be stuck in their mind thinking about, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And be in fear all the time. I don't want people to be in fear. I want them to be happy. So this was a long conversation, a long video. Well, it's not a conversation, it was a monologue about, I think it's about authenticity. It's about expressing yourself. It's about, hey, something happens, but why did it happen? And trying to make sense of it. And like I said, I started with, hey, if you're caught off guard, then what follows next? And I guess it's this. sharing your thoughts about it, talking to others. And whenever someone comes up to you and wants to share what happened to them, please listen. If they want advice, give them advice. If they don't want advice, then don't give them advice. Just listen. I'm one of those people who are easily giving advice. And fortunately for me, the people who know me will tell me, I just want you to listen. Okay. And I'll shut up. I can listen really well, especially when I see people on the phone. It's always a little bit more difficult. And because my thoughts are like 1,000 thoughts per minute. It's like raced up. So I have to tone myself down in order to prevent people from being driven crazy by my enthusiasm and everything that's going on around me. But anyway, if you're curious about those things, which I discussed with the other people, whether it's about looping or about focusing, making backups. So anything that is keeping you from doing that one thing that you want to achieve, then you might want to consider becoming part of my group coaching sessions. And if you want to read the blog about this, then go to, ladylexi.com/blog. That's so cool. I recently purchased ladylexi.com. I'm so proud that I did. And it's now being connected to the platform that I'm using, Kajabi. It's not fully functional, but the blog is already there. And that's why I made this video, so I can upload it and you can get to enjoy it. Anyway, if you need some help or you want to talk about something or you want to go live with me, talking about a substantial topic, then please find me, hit me up and say, hey, Lexi, I want to share this, that, and the other. I want to talk about this. Why don't we go live? Or, just ask for advice. So that's it for now. Make sure you get understood, you get seen, you get heard, but in a respectful manner. But don't take no. Just make sure that you change a little something, you edit a little something, always respectful, not like I did screaming, which of course was a reaction. And at some point, people will start to get you. And maybe you will need to reach out to someone else, like I did with all the doctors. But at some point, the one person that you need will be there for you. Want to know more about speaking up and speaking out, regardless of where you are, then go there and click on the next video.